Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay Moore.
This is Greg Proops.
This is Jordan Harbinger.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan East.
Sebastian Younger.
This is Rick Marotta.
This is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
Hey, this is Skunk Baxter.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
Hey, this is Boone Cutler, and you're listening to the Break It Down Show. Let's break it down.
And now, the Break It Down Show with John Leon Guerrero and Pete A. Turner.
Boone bringing those dulcet tones. I love it. We were talking off mic, and I wanted to capture some of this stuff because it's so good. And you're so outspoken in all of the things that you do, and you're a champion of veterans, as I am. But you were talking about us writing our history and then how we see the conflicts that you and I had to go to in the lens of modern time, reflecting back, but also given President Trump. So I'm just going to hit it to you. How do you see the conflicts now with President Trump in office, and what are your thoughts?
Well, you know, I spent a lot of time writing this book when I was in Iraq, and that particular book, what I said in there, if you really want to know what's happened in a war zone, and if you really want to know how you should support something, talk to a warfighter because they understand it better than anybody else. And now I'm on the other side of that. And, there's nothing wrong with growth. I wrote a lot of stuff. I've said a lot of stuff over the years. I may or may not feel the same way right now. But at the time, that's what was going on. That's what I knew. So that's what I went with. But looking at it now, being a little bit older, and the fact that we are another decade into war, and I'm looking back at, the stuff that we accomplished, the stuff that maybe we didn't accomplish. I remember I was brokenhearted when I heard the announcement the United States was going to pull out of Iraq. I was just like, we got to be there 30 years, or it's just not going to get done, because that's how long change takes. And Germany went beautifully. How long were we in Germany? Oh yeah, we're still there.
There.
It's things like that, that you come to realize that it's not really about endless wars. It's about occupation for a time period long enough for there to be true change. And true change takes a generation. It takes 30 years. You have to wait for one generation to die, one generation to get a little bit older, and then it's that third tier that you're training and you're teaching, which is what we're seeing in Iraq right now. We're seeing those young kids that were I don't want to say our targets. That sounds really bad, but our SIOP targets. As part of a SIOP campaign, we did a lot of stuff with kids, and now you see those young kids that they are now adults, and a lot of them were fatherless, and now they're the ones that are trying to lead the charge for freedom in Iraq. They were the ones most susceptible to that concept, and so I'm not. This is the first time I've lived a lifetime, so I'm not exactly sure how all this is supposed to go down. But when I look at the president's decision on Syria, Turkey, I'm like, yeah, you know what? We do need to get out of there and let some people handle their business. But if I was a warfighter on the ground right now, pulling me out of a dedicated mission, I'd be pissed off. I'd be hurt. I'd be mad. I'd be angry. I remember when we pulled out of Sadr City, it was just like, you bastards, we're not done yet. How can you make this decision? But they're making it from a different perspective. Politicians do what they do. Warfighters do what they do. And we don't always see eye to eye.
Here's the thing is that when I talk to people about the challenges of doing what we did, and I'll just say this, brother, you have one of the hardest jobs. The PSYOP thing, I'm super critical of you guys, and they don't arm you guys with the things that you need to do your job, but it's incredibly difficult. It's not just turning on AC/DC in the middle of the night to keep someone up. There's a lot more going on than that. And just to go into Sadr City and attempt to influence is it's such a challenging thing. So first off, thanks for what you did. And for those that don't know, Boone has got a lot of history. He talks a lot. He had his show Tipping Point. He's also been on John Krotek's show, and obviously John's partnered with me. So if you want to get some background story on Boone's significant injury, his time trying to recover, all of that stuff, go get John's show, Straight Outta Combat Radio, and you'll hear Boone tell his backstory. We're just not even going to cover that stuff, part 2. So, and if you guys need the link and you somehow can't find it, I will put it in the show notes so you can hear Boone's story. And it's incredible. His book is incredible. I mean, Sadr City is such a fucking maze, man. So when you guys pulled out, I was there '08 through 2011-ish, right in that time zone, like back and forth. Sometimes we would be there, sometimes we weren't. Either way, it remained a problem. And it was really hard to get eyes in that place to understand what was happening. They would pop out, launch mortars towards the green zone, and then pop back in, basically with impunity. So these decisions, they do matter. And now we have this thing up north in Kurdistan, and I'm saying Kurdistan, northern Syria. It's hard to. Here's the thing, right? And you know this as well as I do. Most people who are running their mouths about Kurdistan, one, don't know that Kurdistan's not a place on the map. Two, or just talking about no long wars the other day. And three, they have no idea who Kenton Stacey is. And Kenton Stacey walked into a room in Syria, got blown up, became a quadriplegic, lost an eye, and lost his voice. And look, Kenton, I'm sure, is like, look, I'm a warrior. That's what happens. That's the cost of it. But if we're all ready to keep people like Kenton in harm's way without fucking understanding what he has to go through, the fact that Boone, get this, and I know you're an advocate on the VA side because we're hard on these fuckers. There is not a steady flow of mental wellness rehabilitation for him there. So he's sitting there, got 4 kids. 1 kid has cerebral palsy. His wife's running around with all of the problems in the world. That is the ground cost of us going through these long wars. We'll all go. Boone will go. I'll go. We'll go do it. But understand that cost exists and it doesn't go away, and that shit is expensive. And why is Kenton's family suffering needlessly and doesn't have all the care they need?
That's a good point. I have no problem whatsoever killing and pillaging on behalf of Rome. But when I come home, I want to be taken care of.
Yeah.
And that's big. That's big. That's been a big issue. Warfighters fight wars, and that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to win battles. But, it's the warfighter that wins all the battles. It's the politician that loses all the wars.
Hey, this is P.T. Turner from the Break It Down Show, checking in real quick to ask you this. John, Scott, and I all support Save the Brave with our time, our location, our effort, and our money. Each month we give a small amount. Do the same with us. Go to SaveTheBrave.org, click on the Donate tab, pick an amount that you want to come out each month, and they will handle all the rest. I stand behind these folks. Thank you so much. Let's get back to the show.
It's the warfighter that wins all the battles. It's the politician that loses all the wars. That's just the way it goes. So, when I'm looking at the situation right now, yeah, we do have to focus on stuff at home, but we can't take our eye off the ball overseas. But again and again and again, you do have to ask yourself, okay, what is the United States strategic objective in that particular conflict? Do we have a strategic objective right now? Are there any U.S. interests involved right now? Because if there's not, I think if you're the commander in chief, if you're part of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, I think the way you decide things is A, are there U.S. interest involved, and B, what's the strategic objective? And if we don't have any stake, literally a stake in what is our stake in the game right now? Everybody's bitching about us pulling out, but okay, tell me what we have to gain by staying. Yeah. And I know people are going to say, well, the people are, they need us. And you know what? They do need us. And there's people in Africa that need us. And there's people in China that need us. There's people all over the world that need us. So if the standard is when somebody needs us, we have to go. Okay, now I'm talking from the PSYOP perspective. That's how we motivate the populace to be okay with going to wars. We say, hey, people need us. We are needed. We must do this. Okay, but when you're making that decision from a political, strategic, geopolitical standpoint, that's not really a motivator. The motivator is, what do we have to gain? Yeah. And right now, what do we have to gain? Nobody's making that case. Everybody's like, oh, well, they need us. And we, okay, but what do we have to gain? Like right now, what do we have to gain? Well, we can't turn our back on the Kurds. I agree we can't turn our back on the Kurds, but do we take over Syria because of it?
Well, and the other thing, let me jump in here. We are concerned about ISIS. We're concerned about Turkey, having an incursion into Syria. And those things are sort of important. But let's be honest, lately we care a whole lot more about that Turkish border than we do our own southern border. So if it's cool for people to walk around with no border in our country and we're not that worried about it, then it must be cool over there. Why are we getting smoked over there? Why are we in the way of look, those are sovereign nations. If Syria can't defend its border and Turkey wants to come in to push Syrian refugees back into Syria, that sounds like Syrian and Turkish business. And I'm being unfair to the Kurds, but These are big problems. And as you said, the strategic part of it, what are we getting out of it? Right now we're getting the fuck out of the way and letting a complex thing kind of do its own thing. We don't have to own every fight. By the way, while this border crisis is going on, there are people out in Kashmir. Are we desperate to go there? Do we need to insert troops there? No, thank you. Like, we've got enough stuff to deal with. And we're not turning our backs on the Kurds. I mean, look, I'm going to have some Kurdish folks come on the show, and we're really going to talk to them about what our partnership is and what we do. But we'll always be involved with the Kurds in some fashion. It'll wax, it'll wane. We'll be there more, we'll be there less. But these conflicts, as you said, Boone, if we're not going to occupy and help and stay for 50 years, we need to think about how fast we can get the job done, whatever that job is, and then accept that if we stay, there will be trouble. If we go, there will be double. That's the clash. That shit remains true. So everybody's like, let's get out. We can't accomplish anything. True. Babies are going to die because we leave. Are you cool with that? Kenton Stacy's going to get blown up if we stay. Are you cool with that? We can't act like we actually give a fuck about all of the Syrians when we actually, in action, do not give a fuck as a country.
And your conversation, everything you just talked about right there, that entire nugget is the nugget that people are discussing right now in the United States. And for most of them, it's not because they give two fucks about what's going on over there, but it's a way to say, fuck you, President Trump.
Well, yeah,
it's just that it's the political mechanism. It's the device right now that's being used to influence people over here in the United States because we have an election coming up. It's nothing more than that. I mean, seriously, people got to see this. This is nothing more than another device used to be divisive against the current sitting president. I don't think, because you're right, the people that are making these same claims that they are making, they really don't know what's going on over there. They just, they're getting fed another thing. Television news. It's not news. It's a PSYOP factory. I mean, every one of them. Yeah. They're all just PSYOP factories.
Says
I don't watch
the PSYOP expert.
Yeah, I can't watch it. I mean, it's so packed with messages. It's like, my God, I want to puke. I mean, people are absorbing this every day. They have no idea what they are. I mean, when you take the overt news and how that's skewed, when you take micro-targeting that's being done on the internet, and then you start seeing how people just divide themselves just because of their personalities, which would be natural. These things are the true threats to the United States, because you have other entities that can do these digital covert actions within the United States, manipulate the people to conduct actions inside the country without having any foreign agents whatsoever inside the country, and still manipulate that country to do things on their behalf. That's happening. And I really do think there's going to be an element of the Department of Defense involved within the next few years in very short order at some point in time that has to, the DOD has to address the fact that there are bad actors conducting covert action digitally within the United States that don't have to be here. And, the cyberspace is an area. It's a ground. It has to be occupied. It has to be controlled. And I know people are going to scream and yell and say, oh, well, what about free speech? We're not talking about that. We're talking about true covert action in the United States being done digitally through micro-targeting and through
all right, so I'm going to push back on you in this so I can understand what you're saying, because I'm a big proponent of free speech. It's my job to tolerate, your right to say what you want to say. But covert action is a different thing. But I don't know where the line is. So when does your ability to create something change to covert action?
I think the ability is that message being influenced by a foreign entity? Is the person that's creating the message being influenced by the foreign entity to create the covert action within the populace of the United States, to create the influence that develops our path, that develops, how our country runs and how it makes decisions? Because if you have this digital covert action platform that exists, it will be exploited. It will be weaponized. Everything is weaponized till something better can be weaponized. That's just a fact. And the biggest threat that I see to the United States in and of itself is, and we've fallen into this conversation because of the stuff you were saying. when you were saying how people don't understand what's happening in Syria and the Kurds, everything else. And I said, yes, that is a device. That's a device used specifically to influence people on this end. That gets done over and over and over again. So where is the line? I think where the line is an American having a conversation with an American about, and it's a free speech issue, or is it a foreign entity trying to stir some shit up?
Yeah. It's a tough thing to sort out. And then the other thing is
cyber has no borders. Cyber has no borders.
Right. Well, this is the interesting question, right? Because I know that, folks that do PSYOP, you guys have a lot of restriction because you have to. You can't just do what you want to do. But then again, you guys can't do anything because you're so restricted. But is DOD the agent that does this stuff, or is it FBI? And, if we're going to try to figure these things out, does the FBI need an even bigger presence for cyber? Because we always want to put shit on the FBI. But, again, all of these things cost money. So how many new agents do you need to make this happen,
I think the reason I say FBI, I mean, I don't know, maybe it is FBI. I'm not that smart, but I do know that there will have to be a greater interface regardless of what agency it is. I say DOD because it is a covert action there would be a military response to that. That's how it would be. Because the response to that would have to be a response to a foreign entity, which I think would fall DOD. But I don't know who's going to do it, and I don't know how it's going to get accomplished. But I can tell you that it is a definite. I think it's already here, and I think we're all kind of silly not thinking it's already here. It's here. We're all being influenced, and who's influencing us? And no, do I think Russian collusion and all this other stuff? No, wrong vein. Not even going down there. What I'm talking about is true campaigns. I mean, look at QAnon. That's a campaign. That's a rumor campaign. That's a whisper campaign. That's what that is. It's digital. It's global. It's multi-ethnic. It's multicultural. It's global. It's war. I mean, it's everywhere, and it's all pushing people to a different message, and it's getting people to pay attention to one speaker that is contra of what the national or public media has been. So we're taking things on a totally new platform yet again. At what point in time do we look at it and say, "Hey, listen, cyber is a land with no borders, but it affects my land inside this border."
Right.
How do nobody thought about, oh, it's great, we're going to connect the world. Hey, that's great. I'm all for connecting the world. But what happens again? Everything is weaponized until something better can be weaponized. This is now weaponized. What do we do now?
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is what can we do now? We have a Congress that won't legislate, and we have a president that divides us instantly. The second we, raise our hand and say anything, it's like we all disagree with someone, And again, we went from, gosh, I hate to even do this, the left candidates, all of those, all talking negatively about long wars because they want to stop those because somehow they see President Trump as being a long war fan. Although of the last 5 presidents, he's the most dove person out of all of them. And then now a lot of those same people, the exact same people, are saying we shouldn't turn our backs on the Kurds. At some point, we have to stop all that nonsense. And whether you're conservative or you're liberal or you're in the middle like I am, we need more of us going in the same direction. And I don't hear a lot of that talk from the folks that are going to lead us because it doesn't pay the bills. So I suppose, Boone, we've been to places where politics are way more complicated than they are here. People are like, more parties. Okay, great. Well, Iraq had 50 plus parties. How sweet is it there? No, that was a huge complaint. Like when we were doing atmospherics on the people, we'd say, what is the biggest threat to Iraq? Things like that. Those were the questions. And they would say, there's too many parties. There's too many parties. And the parties cause the fighting. That's what they would say. The parties cause the fighting. And I'm like, wait a minute, you guys, we just pulled this dictator out of a fucking hole. And now you're telling me there's too many parties? I mean, even in that very dynamic environment, they didn't want to go back to a dictator, but they didn't want all the parties. So again,
these things have to get sorted out over time. I think Iraq will be an easier issue to deal with. I think a lot of things over there will be easier thing to deal with in the United States than our own politics right now. And the funny thing about Trump, if you look at me talking about being a dove, Trump is, if you go, I'm not talking Ross Perot. As soon as I say Reform Party, everybody says, oh, Ross Perot. I'm not talking about Ross Perot, but if you go to Wikipedia and you look up the Reform Party and you read that very detailed, and there's tenets of the Reform Party. One of them's Big Tent. There's all these different names. If you look at that, you will see that Trump is not following anything that is Republican Party. He is a Republican following the Reform Party platform.
Yeah.
To a T.
Yeah.
And so now here comes the next question. Is there going to be a new party introduced into the United States?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that serves our purposes. You know, I understand why we think we want it, but that means that most of us will hate the outcome every time. And that hate doesn't have an outlet. And, oh, man, things get nasty. Let's get away from this particular topic. And let's well, no, because
I agree with you. No,
because
I
we're not
agree
going
with
to
you,
solve
man.
it, you know, like
No, it's not. But you know what you and I just did? You and I just talked about something that nobody else is talking about. And people don't do that on air anymore. Everybody parrots somebody else.
Yeah.
And we just talked about something that was not parroted. It wasn't something else. It's just in the and people are going to have to actually engage their brain and not engage the psyop they've been trained to think when they listen to that last piece of the conversation. Really, digital covert action in the United States by foreign, really. Go look up some of these terms, because this is where we're at, people. This is where we're really at while everybody's looking at the other stuff.
Well, and understand that, like, this is all done with a money motive too. You know, everybody's trying to gather power and money. And so we do things like, this is why President Trump is great. He's great for business. You know, it's almost like this self-fulfilling prophecy of, like, the left hates him, the right loves him. They all pimp him out to make more money, which helps the economy. As long as we're all buying cars and ignoring, that fact that we're not dealing with anything, I guess we're all fine. And I'm not afraid of the topic, on politics. I just, I want to move things on because you have a lot more to offer.
I get worn out on it, to be honest.
Yeah,
with you.
yeah.
But I am all about moving on. I just wanted to thank you for having the ability and for having the desire to have a show where people can really just have a conversation. It's not like, here's questions 1 through 10. I researched you on the internet.
Yeah,
and let's cover the same SEO. Let's cover the same SEO that everybody else does.
Yeah.
No, don't act like you know me because you read about me on the internet. Let's learn about me, but then let's have a real conversation, because if you keep me on if we all stay on the same topics, we're never going to grow. And those topics may or may not be, shall I say, real.
Well, yeah, let me just put it to this way. And my audience is worldwide. I've got people in France that love the show. And I love France. I can't wait to go again. So, I'm trying to provide a perspective. I want to really offer your perspective. Like, I'm working on having a very high level Kurdish guy on the show. Because what I don't hear when people yammer on about Kurdistan, I don't hear actual Kurds. I hear people that are Kurds that maybe live in the States. I'm talking to a guy that's involved in day-to-day Kurdish things. And, if you know anything about Kurdistan at all, there's a lot of factions within Kurdistan on what to do and how to proceed. It's not my job to figure that out. It's my job to tease out the best of that person. And when they talk about their perspective, that's what matters. Their perspective isn't wrong. How they analyze it, how they execute off that vision, sure, we can question that. But what they see and experience and think, that's them. And if I'm able to provide those perspectives, then we all can go, you know what? Actually, we just had a show. I had an SF guy named Herb Thompson, and we were talking about a mountain, don't make a mountain out of a molehill. And I'm like, every time someone says that, I think, let's go the other way. And there's two aspects of this. Don't make a mountain into a molehill. Like, don't underestimate a huge challenge. And 2, don't put all of your effort carving a mountain down into a molehill size, because you're probably fucking wasting your time. It's all about
Because what the hell are you going to do with the molehill?
Right. Yeah. Mission accomplished. Now what? So it's
we did all this shaving of a mountain. What do we do now with the molehill? Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. And then also taking on like the Taliban, like, yeah, we'll just do this. will you? You know, like that's taking a mountain and making it a molehill. Like, no, that shit's really fucking hard.
Oh, really hard. Really hard.
Yeah.
Really hard. Again, takes a generation. It takes a generation. It takes a lot of occupation. It takes a lot of things for a long, long time. Most Americans don't have the stomach for it. And you know, how many places can you be at one time?
Yeah. How many places can you be well at one time?
Exactly. You got to prioritize. And we got some rebuilding to do of our military. There's no doubt about that. Sure.
And there's a lot of conversation there. One of the things I wanted to point out when it comes to PSYOPs and being somewhere well and the Taliban and like understanding how big this mountain is, there's a guy in every province that does this where there's the Taliban. And he's a military guy. And his job is to run the program that convinces the Taliban to come out of the hills, get into the case management program, and come back to Afghanistan and be a regular Afghan person. That military person, can literally sit there their entire tour and accomplish nothing and have that be a great outcome. Because guess what? The Taliban don't want to come out of the hills by and large. Like, we don't offer anything specifically better. So they have this great program, and the theory is, oh, yeah, these guys are going to be like, oh, there's $1,000. I'll come down. I'll get my $1,000. I'll reintegrate. I want it. Bullshit. That is taking a mountain and making it a molehill.
Mm-hmm. I get you. Right on.
Okay, cool. So you were talking about our history and this ship that we're building and getting people to come on. Let's take on that topic and kind of play with that and see where we go.
Well, the ship that we're building, you know, I think there's a lot of people, you know, the beautiful thing about our community right now, specifically right now, is that people have something to bitch about. And in 2009, 2010, 2008, you know, we really didn't have a whole lot to bitch about because there was nothing there. You know, at best, at that time, we could get involved in the VSOs, the Veteran Service Organizations, the traditional ones, the national ones, the American Legion, DAV, so on and so forth. We're the first generation of warfighters to be able to come home and to be able to occupy the digital space. That hasn't happened before. This is a new thing. And you can see the things that have come from this, where before there would, I mean, it's given birth to the veteran influencer, the warfighter influencer, you know, things like this. It's changed everything. You know, it doesn't matter. And the videos that are out there, the T-shirt companies that are out there, you know, being able to connect with each other online. I think it's done a tremendous benefit to us, you know, with regards to suicide and healthcare, because we can share information a lot better and get guys, you know, squared away because we're sharing each other's knowledge. We didn't have that before. I just think we really need to open our eyes and go, hey, wait a minute. Yeah, there is something unique about us. You know, when history looks back on this time, we are the group that came home from war and occupied the digital space. This never happened before.
Huh. I mean, we're definitely the first group to come back and instantly start saying, no shit, there I was. Here's the story. And there's something to that. And I don't mean like that we're bragging about it, but we're actually saying this is the cost of what we're doing. This is what's going on. This is how hard it is. We're the first ones to do that. And is it because of the digital space? Because we all have access to the airwaves? I mean, you look at my show, it's sort of pirate radio from the old days. I just came on and started talking.
Yep, that's exactly right. It's like pirate radio from the old days, except now we attract, you know, like attracts alike. So, you know, if you have a show about warfighters, you know, I had the first big show for warfighters, and it was the warfighter perspective, and it was beautiful, man. It really was. It was amazing at that time, because as I was going through the stuff you go through when you come home, I was going through it on air. People got to listen to it. And that was a big deal. And that happened in a lot of different places. The other thing that's very unique, because of this digital age and because of stolen valor and how we feel about it, there's a lot more accuracy of how warfighters are, how warfighters feel, what warfighters think. There's much more accuracy and a lot less lore than there has been in the past. And so we've been challenged. I know I've been challenged with this. Well, why can't you guys just do what the World War II guys did? They came home and they just went to work. Well, no, they didn't. That's not what happened. And That's what that's what Granddad said to you because you were a little bitch when you were fucking 5 years old. And what was he going to do? No, I came home and I fucking drank my ass off for about 10 years. And it wasn't real great between me and Grandma. You think he was going to have that conversation with you? No, he wasn't. That's the kind of stuff he talks about down at the VFW. But and so that was a total fallacy. And there was no record of Grandpa when he came home of what he was going through, what he felt like, what was happening. You just got the Grandpa version. You didn't get the I just got back version.
Right. Yeah, man, that's true. You didn't get the the VFW has people in there and there's some bitching and complaining, but that's true anywhere. But to put it in the context of these fights is a different thing. And I think you're right. Like, we're learning a lot about what each of us goes through. I mean, it used to be that and I'll just use us, as the mirror. We would get mad at the REMPs, the rear echelon motherfuckers. Now we're all kind of going, actually, shut the fuck up. Like, these guys, everybody's out there. We're all losing something. I'll submit this. You don't have to agree, but especially like when people talk about females in combat and everything, and how they get hurt more often and they can't do it. No one's asked me to do a push-up in combat, and every single person who enters a combat zone for any length of time receives damage, an injury of some kind. It's usually pretty significant over the course of their life. To think otherwise is to minimize how hard it is on all of us to go do these things.
Everybody I know on some level, put it this way. I know in Iraq, everything either shot at you, blew up around you, or you fell off of it because it was just it was crumbling around you. And that was the environment. So yeah, there's plenty of people getting hurt. I mean, and there was just a lot of slugging it out. But I don't. I think it's interesting that a lot of people, like I said, the beautiful thing about our community now is that we have something to bitch about. Yeah. In 2009, we didn't. There was nothing there.
Yeah. All right. I like it. So what have we learned? How are we better with the things that we have to go through, post-combat, post-deployment? What are we better at doing now that no other generation, apart from telling the story? What do we have going for us?
I'll tell you what we're better at. I think we're better at correcting our azimuth.
Hey, this is P.A. Turner from Lions Rock Productions. We create podcasts around here. And if you, your brand, or your company want to figure out how to do a podcast, just talk to me. I'll give you the advice on the right gear, the best plan, and show you how to take a podcast that makes sense for you, that's sustainable, that's scalable, and fun. Hit me up at pete@breakitdownshow.com. Let me help. I want to hear about it.
I think we're better at correcting our azimuth a lot faster. Like if you're a warfighter, you've still got an element of accountability. We can still live by that ethos because there's a group of people that we can associate with online who will say, "Hey, dude, you're fucking drinking too much. Knock that shit off." Or or a guy is going to be like, "Hey, man, it's a fucking rough day, but it's only one day. Tomorrow's another day. Get through this one." And I don't think that was happening in the past. And because it didn't happen in the past, I think these problems manifested generationally. Okay, I'll give you an example. My grandfather, I've talked about this before, he was the longest held POW in World War II. He was captured on Guam on December 8th, the day after the Pearl Harbor attack.
Wow.
And he spent the entire war in captivity. Well, he raised my father. My father was a Vietnam veteran. I served in Iraq. But I guarantee you, like when my father was growing up, they laughed about it. They made a joke about it. Like, they'd be walking through town and my grandfather would tell, his son and his daughter, which was my dad and his sister, to stand outside of a bar while he went inside and had a drink. And they would literally stand outside the bar because they can go inside, and he would go inside and have a drink. Well, that went on his entire life.
Yeah.
And he was part of the POW MIA groups and all that stuff, but they all kind of did that because they had nobody there in the immediacy who could kind of say, "Hey, instead of doing that, let's do something else." And so they didn't have that. So I think we correct our problems much faster. and we can get guys to people who have a little bit more wisdom much faster, much easier, and they can speak directly rather than trying to go down to a library. In the old days, it would be like this: go to a library or a college, pull off a book, try and read the whole book and find something within that entire book that applied to you. But now you can just go into a group, put up a post, and someone will magically appear that knows exactly what you're talking about. That shit has never been available before.
That is so true, man. My advice to young folks, especially transitioning folks, and in their own regard, they're sort of young, is to get a mentor. And then the next question they always ask is, well, how do I do that? And I'm like, pick the person you want to be and ask them. But how do I ask them? You ask them, and then if they say no, you just say, who would you recommend I talk to? Most everybody is going to say, yeah, I'd love to help you in some way here. And you got to do what they say. You got to be you have to be mentorable, but
you have to be committed. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, okay, if you're passionate enough to find me and dig me up and ask me, then yeah, let's do it. I need you to read these 5 books. We'll talk in 3 months, or whatever. Then you better fucking read those 5 books, It's their program. Get behind it. We definitely have that ability now. And that's a rare thing.
That's a rare thing. It's the first time it's happened. And now what I think is really beautiful, because so many of us are now getting well, it took me a long time to get well, and I had to go through a lot of things. And it wasn't just coming home from the war and dealing with the mental aspect. I sometimes I'm not sure if that was nearly as hard as dealing with the TBI aspect and what that meant to me mentally. Dealing with the physical stuff, surgeries, and now heart condition. All this stuff, all secondary to military service. But we're getting well, and because we're getting well, you see more guys with online radio shows, podcasts. You see more guys who want to find a way to get their niche in this thing, whether it's because they want to be popular or they just care about the, what's going on. Either way, people are getting involved. If you want to go on a ruck march this weekend, you can find some place in the country where somebody's walking around with silkies carrying an American flag, doing a ruck march. Mm-hmm. You can find that. I'm telling you right now, it wasn't that long ago. We're talking 2010. 2010 was the first time I spoke about cannabis on social media, and it was crickets. I remember I was on one page. It was I support General Stan McChrystal, and it was just kind of a page that people could talk about things. And I brought up cannabis, and it was crickets, man. Nobody said anything, not one word. People were scared to death. They didn't want to discuss it. And then maybe you get one person pop up and said, it worked for me. And then you'd get 3 people who say, oh, it's a devil's lettuce. You can't do that. Whatever. But nobody understood the endocannabinoid system at the time. And now that's common knowledge. So we've done a really fucking good job occupying the digital space. The warfighter community has done a fucking goddamn good job. This shit did not exist in 2010. Less than a decade, we built something that will last forever.
Right. Yeah, and what we're asking of we know the cost and communicate that cost better than any generation before. And so now, like someone like Kenton Stacy, who's sitting in his house right now trying to figure out what the fuck am I going to do next, we now know, like, okay, this is what that takes. Herb Thompson and I were just talking about the pace of deployments. Now, look, if we got to go and go fuck shit up and it's time to go, then it's time to go. But we also have learned to back off. We can't burn SEALs out in 11 years because all they've done is operate. We have to find different ways to do it. And so we are, as an organization, getting better at that. And so there needs to be some things. And honestly, I want to give the civilians credit. It's hard to connect the dots between Boone, his injuries, and his struggle, and something more than thank you for your service. It's hard to do that. We're getting better at that, though, Boone. I really see a lot of people that it was easy for me to dismiss people's as saying, yeah, you don't really support. It's just they don't know how to support. We're getting better at allowing civilians to have time, money, access, hugs, whatever it is, and have it mean something.
So true. And I'll tell you, I am probably the worst. I'm the most guilty in this community as far as the digital side. I mean, I sounded like some Malcolm X shit in 2010. I mean, I'm serious. It was that way because there was a bigger chasm, you know, between veterans, between warfighters and civilians than there is now. And a lot of that had to do with, you know, a lot of pain from Vietnam, you know, that existed, that was going on. You know, they were trying to mimic that time and space because that's the only thing they had in their brain. But now they have something else in their brain. We've educated the civilian populace, and the ones who wanted to get involved and sincere did, and they have. And then they've told their friends and family, and that's worked out very well for us. Again, I think that this community really needs to give themselves a fuckload of credit because we pulled some shit together to help each other. And now we have the opportunity to not just help each other, but we can help the rest of the country. You know, I've recently been contacted. There's some stuff going on, but you know, there's a growing suicide rate in the civilian populace. And people have contacted me and said, Boone, how do we incorporate what's been done in the warfighter community with the Spartan Pledge and other things and transfer that over? And I'm like, you know, I really got to think about that one for a minute. But the fact is the conversation is happening, and it wouldn't have happened before.
Yeah. In my hometown, on Friday, a guy that I grew up with, we lost him to suicide. And, you know, what I see and these are people that I grew up with, you know, we all know each other. We're the same in so many ways. And what they're struggling with is the why and what should I have done? And it's welcome to the party in some ways, you know, like, yeah, it's hard when the person has quit. They don't know that they can reach out. They have lost that ability. And it's really, I look at it like this, like you build the organization so that people can reach out to folks that need it when they no longer can. And then maybe you save some of them, but a lot of them you don't save because it is one of those things. So let's get active up front ahead of all of that. And let's go out, invite your friend out. Hey, let's go get a sandwich. Let's go get a drink. Let's go hang out and engage your community more because that person who's hurting, they don't want to load you down with that burden. They just, you know, they're scared, they're alone, and they give up because they just don't understand, you know, the day-to-day life. Sometimes it fucking sucks and you get kicked in the nuts. But if we engage more often, you can hopefully and that's just how I see it. You can maintain the required level of care that you'd want to give to your friend instead of like, it's too late. And you look back because once it's too late, forget about it. It's too late. Go grab the next person who's in the chute and help them want to save their own life.
I've seen it. It's very interesting. And this is where I see the biggest change. The warfighter community got into the digital space to get out of turmoil in their current life. It was an escapism. Mm-hmm. And when they did so, we found positive things to pull us out of the depression, learn coping skills, things like that, because that's what we were looking for, because we're hurting from coming home, injuries, and, you know, post-combat life changes is what I call them. Mm-hmm. We were hurting from these so we were going online to find answers to resolve that. Here's the interesting thing. The civilian populace, it's the opposite. They're becoming more isolated and going into the digital space and then getting themselves basically, I don't want to say I don't have a better term, but so please excuse me. They're basically finding the best pity party to be involved in, mm-hmm. and all the bad stuff. And they are affected by different things, the social media, and the world is just a negative space. I mean, the internet gives you the ability to really climb in the deepest, darkest hole you want to get into.
Yeah.
You know, it really does. And I think people fall into that stuff, and then their psyche gets involved and it affects the real space, the real world. And so we've got a little bit of a thing there. So when people have contacted me and said, hey, can we do this? And how do we transfer what you've done into the civilian world? I say, well, first, what is one of the main causes of this increased uptake on people taking their own lives? I think it has to do with isolation and social media. So what you said is exactly correct, which goes back to Spartan Pledge. The Spartan Pledge is, you know, basically having a battle buddy and a mission. What does that mean to civilians? Having a good friend and something to do.
Yeah. Rather
than sitting at home figuring out, you know, what are the side effects of the next drug I'm taking, or, you know, self-diagnosing themselves psychiatrically, or or physically, you know, being their own doctor online and then getting themselves in all kinds of problems, or just being depressed and being around other people that are just being depressed. You can't do that. You cannot be a depressed person being around other people that are being depressed and not think you're going to want to put a bullet in your head. You have to be around something different.
You know, and let me just jump on in with you with that, because one of the things on the other end, right? So be more a part of the community, get out and be available to people that you care about. Spend fucking time with them. Okay, great. That sounds like fun. Let's go do that. The other end of it is like, if you feel like you tend towards depression, I certainly do. I've wanted to kill myself. I've considered it. I knew I needed to be of service to someone else because, one, I lacked the perspective to know, hey, this all, like, first off, this can be worse, and there's a lot of people dealing with worse. So before I get to my own pity party, let me go help someone out. Even if I've got nothing, I've got time, I've got attention. You know, I can stand somewhere and just have a conversation with someone. So getting yourself out and doing something charitable in service of others and you know, spend time there instead of, you know, in the echo chamber, on the internet, on TV, go help out, save the brave in our case, or, you know, whatever a charity it is, whatever thing you're passionate about. And if you don't know, that's the best thing of all, because you get to try all of it. You get to say, I want to try some of that. I want to try some of that. I want to help people with ALS. That way, you're in a community, you get some perspective on what struggle looks like outside of your own head. Not that anybody's struggling harder than anybody else. Struggle is struggle. But you can see, like, there's a lot of people struggling. I'm not alone. And you are interacting with people that have compassion. And you might just find someone who's ready and prepared to help you and save you.
I think you're right. I think your work is my work. You know, by doing work for somebody else, you're actually helping yourself. It just happens that way. I couldn't agree with you. Everything you said was definitely just spot on. It couldn't be perfect. It could be better. That's exactly right. You know, I didn't, you know, one thing real quick, you talk about perspective. I have a new saying in my life, and that is, I don't have a problem if I don't have a heart problem, because my heart gave out on me last year and I was going to die. And I was bedridden. I had to be in a bed. I could not get out of the bed. I mean, I could barely get to the bathroom. My wife was feeding me in bed. I had to go to Panama to get stem cell therapy. It saved my life, and it wouldn't have happened otherwise. I would have died. And so I have like a new threshold because I've got time away from the war. And now this has been a new thing in my life. So I have a new threshold of what a problem is. And in my life, I now know, because I've been through something else, that I don't have everything is manageable so long as my heart's working. I think that's the bottom line that maybe a lot of us could learn something from. If your heart's working, everything's manageable.
Politically, we've seen shit that's way worse than what we've got. Financially, you know, we know that, like, here's one of my favorite things. Like, you're complaining about the 1%.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, dummy, pull the camera back and look at the world and decide where you fall. You know, like, you want to complain about the 1%? You are the 1%, motherfucker.
So true.
All of those things are like, no one's looking over iron sights deciding yes, no, when they're looking at me, because that's certainly been a case. You know, with the line of work that you do, I know this is true just going in. I have had intel reports come back, and I use my name. I use Pete when I collect, right? Because I want to know. It's genuine for me, and that's how I do it. All the time, they're like, we want to know who Pete is. We want to kill Pete. There's a bounty on Pete. Get Pete. And it's got to be the same with you. No one's doing that, you know, to where my life is in danger.
No, nobody's doing that. And I was a very popular person in Solder City. I mean, I was a very popular person. And so, you know, having people know you by name, that know what you're doing. Yeah, that's another level of that game of combat. That's another level. And no, I don't. Well, maybe I do. You know, maybe there are people here like, hey, that Boone Cutler guy, we'll take him out. I'm sure that. But do they really have the balls to do it 99% of the time? No. And that was a different case some other place. So it's it's good to be alive, man. That's all I got to say. It's just good to be alive, and everything's manageable. It just is.
Well, let me give you the mic for a few minutes. You know how to do this. I don't want to cover how I got started in podcasting, because that's a question everybody leads with. So I'm going to take that one away from you. But why don't you hit me with a couple questions, and then we'll wrap it up.
When did you join the military? And did you get what you were looking for?
I joined the military in 1994, And yes, I was unable to find a job in my field that my college degree was in TV radio, and I wanted to be a sports guy. And I had the standard problem a college kid has. I had no experience, but no one would give me a shot to get experience. And I went to the bottom of the barrel market-wise. I'm like, what are the smallest markets? And I sent my stuff out, and I could not find a way in. And back then, you sort of just had to like make your own way. And I wasn't figuring it out. And the path I was on was going to lead to, just not where I wanted to go. Nothing wrong with staying home. Nothing wrong with playing softball, in rec league and everything. But that wasn't the path that I wanted to be on. And so I needed to get some experience. I wanted to go do some crazy hard shit. And that's ultimately what I got to do. And it turned out that I the right job sort of picked me, in a lot of ways. And there's a lot of things you could have done, I could have done. Our jobs overlap a lot. But the right job found me, and I was able to make a lot of it, because I was out of the military more than I was in it. I was with the military more than I was in it, I should say. I was able to stay in the field and get better and better and better and better at being deployed, at being on the ground, as opposed to, and you know how this goes, Boone, like as you get good, they're like, hey, that's great. Why don't you run ops? Hey, why don't you be a first sergeant?
Yeah.
Hey, why don't you go nowhere near the battlefield? You're like, but I know everything now.
Yeah. You're looking at a guy who was an E5 for 17 years. There's a reason for that.
Yeah. I actually want to go do this work. Yeah.
No.
You want me to do this work.
Okay. Let me ask you another question. We talked about the warfighter community being in the digital space. You're in the digital space as a warfighter. What do you see, and what do you see your trajectory as, and where do you see yourself in 5 years?
The 5-year question. Well, ultimately, I would like to be making more original content in terms of less long-form interviews, or I guess a greater focus on original content in the podcast space. So ideally, when movies and documentaries come out, there's an accompanying podcast that joins it, but also just some completely original stuff. Take screenplays that should be made because they're all over this town. I live in Southern California. And there's no bandwidth in the movie world to make them. Well, I want to make those things. And then personally, I want to get past the point where I am a veteran first. And I'm pretty much past that, but I want to be seen as like, this guy's a podcaster. He makes great shit. And then someone's like, wasn't he a spy at one point? That's what I want. Like, I want to get further and further past like high school football and just continue to evolve into this podcast expert and producer that I am.
I like that answer. Matter of fact, I think that's something that's exactly, I'm getting ready to do another project. I'm sorry to talk about myself during your face, but I'm getting ready to do another project coming up soon. And I've already told the producers, listen, I don't want to be marketed as a warfighter. I want to be marketed as X who happens to be, a combat veteran. As a matter of fact, I don't even want it to be in any of the literature because people already know. They'll find it out. And I would rather it just be a thing that exists, and but not a thing that everything is based on.
Yeah, it's not a hinge. It's just part of my story. And no, I totally agree. I mean, that's really what transition is. Like you do transition. Hopefully, I never have to go back and go fight. Hopefully, we aren't stupid enough to have a civil war because look, I'll tell you this right now. Nobody wants you and me against them in a war. Like, that's just bad for you. That's bad.
Oh,
like,
that's
nothing good.
That's bad for you because we've already collected 20 million people who are ready to roll, and it's not hard for us to do. And here's the thing about the Civil War thing. I don't think it's going to happen because people are really attached to CVS and Walmart. Yeah, I was out at the Bundy Ranch when that whole thing happened, and the primary reason I went out there is because they're making all these claims about veterans with PTSD with guns, and it's going to go bad. And I was like, oh, I better get down there. This is because they're going to use it again, that political leverage on certain topics. So I went down there and I looked around. Dude, I'm not kidding you. It was a fucking barbecue. Okay, it was it was an open carry barbecue. That's what it was. Okay, at that time, and then. And so I started reporting on that, started talking about that, and it was just it was just an interesting thing how these things work out. But I think we're representing ourselves well in this community, and we need to continue to do that. What I told those people down at Bundy, because they were talking revolution, all this other stuff, and I said, wait a minute, there's not going to be any of that, because the last time that happened, people were self-sustainable. They didn't need Walmart, they didn't need CVS. I said, and you know what? Your wife goes 2 weeks without a fucking warm shower, you're fucked. You're fucked. You know, you don't know how to deal with that kind of stress.
All these folks in California, and I love being from California, that are talking about, the Civil War and everything. They threatened to turn the power off in the Bay Area, like northern part of California, because of high winds and a threat of fire. And people were losing their fucking minds at the threat of it. Like, oh no, not my power. Like, are you kidding me?
Yeah, exactly. People are screaming at this. Usually not one of them has spent 2 nights, let alone 1 night, in the cold.
Yeah.
It just doesn't happen. And to have no foreseeable future to end that, no, I just don't see it. It's not realistic. We have to do things.
No, it's way too hard. They don't know how hard it is.
They're not prepared. And you know what? It'll get shot down before it gets off the ground. But thank you for having me on your show, man. It's really fantastic.
Yeah, man. I really appreciate you. Let's do some more. And everybody, this is Boone Cutler. You can find him all over the internet. I'm not even going to bother telling you where, because you type in Boone Cutler, his face comes up, and you'll be able to participate with what he does. He's a good dude. Support him. Everybody, thank you so much. Boone, thank you. I'll talk to you all later.